Picture this, it's the mid-1980s. The huge boat-like cars that once ruled American roads are starting to look like dinosaurs. A new wave of buyers, the so-called yuppies, have money to spend, and they don't want their father's land yacht. They're hungry for something different, something with a bit of spice. They want performance, they want precision, and they're finding it in showrooms with names like BMW, Audi, and Mercedes-Benz. Ford, the American giant, saw all this money flowing to German automakers and decided it wanted a piece of that pie. They devised a bold plan. They would bring their own high-performance European cars to the States, slap a new name on them, and go head-to-head with the titans from Germany. This wasn't just about selling a few cars. This was meant to be a hostile takeover of the luxury market. The result of this grand plan was a new brand with a name that was supposed to sound like it was born on the Autobahn, Merkur. The idea came from a sharp executive named Bob Lutz, who knew his way around cars. He'd even worked for BMW. The plan seemed solid. They had the vehicles, they had the money, and they had the full power of Ford behind them. This was supposed to be Ford's grand entrance, its red carpet moment in the luxury world. But that dream quickly became a nightmare of terrible sales, confused customers, and a quiet, embarrassed exit just a few years later. By 1989, the Merkur brand was dead. This is the story of how Ford's multi-million-dollar gamble went so wrong. On paper, the plan was brilliant. Instead of designing a car from scratch, Ford reached into its European division, which was already making some of the most popular cars on the continent. The first shot they fired was the Merkur XR4Ti, which arrived in showrooms for the 1985 model year. Now, this was no rebadged Mercury sedan. The XR4Ti was a genuine Ford Sierra XR4i from Europe, a car famous overseas for its wild, futuristic look and impressive performance. Ford couldn't use the Sierra name in the US because General Motors already owned the rights to a similar name. So they went with XR4Ti. The T stood for turbo because Ford replaced the European V6 with the punchy 2.3-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine from the Mustang SVO. Paired with a 5-speed manual transmission, it produced 175 horsepower, making the American version even faster than its European counterpart. This was a true rear-wheel drive sports coupe with a fully independent suspension and a radical biplane spoiler that looked like nothing else on American roads. The car magazines loved it. Car and Driver even placed the XR4Ti on its 10 best lists in 1985, calling it a car effectively yanked off the Autobahn. By all accounts, it was a solid machine, good enough to compete with the big names. Then, for the 1988 model year, the XR4Ti was joined by a big brother, the Merkur Scorpio. This was a larger, more luxurious 5-door hatchback based on the European Ford Scorpio, which had won the prestigious European Car of the Year award in 1986. Aimed directly at rivals like the BMW 5 Series, the Scorpio came loaded with high-tech features for the era, including standard anti-lock brakes. It offered a smooth ride and a powerful V6 engine. With these two cars, Ford had a German 1-2 punch ready to shake up the market. What could possibly go wrong? The problems began before a single car was even sold. The first issue was the name Merkur. Pronounced Merkur, it's simply the German word for Mercury. It was meant to sound sophisticated and European, but to most Americans, it was just strange and difficult to say. It was a new name with no brand history, and Ford's marketing department completely failed to explain to people what it was supposed to represent. The second huge mistake was the sales strategy. Bob Lutz, the man behind the plan, wanted standalone premium dealerships for Merkur, similar to what Acura and Lexus would later do successfully. But Ford decided to cut costs. Instead, they stuck the Merkurs in the corners of about 800 Lincoln Mercury showrooms. It was an awkward fit, to say the least.
This is terrible.
You had salespeople who were used to selling large, comfortable Lincoln Town cars suddenly trying to explain a quirky, turbocharged German hatchback to their clientele. They didn't understand the car, and frankly, they had little incentive to learn. Why bother with this strange import when you could easily sell a high-profit Grand Marquis? The Merkur brand was ultimately ignored. And then there was the price. The XR4T started at a price equivalent to over $45,000 today. The larger Scorpio, which launched in 1988, had a sticker price of over $23,000, about the same as a well-equipped Lincoln Town car at the time. This put Merkur in the worst possible position, too expensive for the average car buyer, but lacking the brand prestige to compete with BMW or Mercedes. People didn't see a German performance car, they saw a ridiculously overpriced Ford. The public's reaction was, to put it mildly, underwhelming. Ford hoped to sell between 15,000 and 20,000 cars annually, but never came close to that goal. Merkur sold around 14,000 cars in its first year and a little over 12,000 in its second. The arrival of the Scorpio in 1988 didn't help matters. Total sales for the Scorpio over its entire time in the US were just over 22,000 units. At its lowest point, the sales figures worked out to fewer than 10 cars per dealership per year. A major contributor to the problem was the fluctuating exchange rate between the US dollar and the German Deutsche Mark. As the German currency grew stronger, the cost to import the cars skyrocketed, forcing Ford to repeatedly raise the price of cars that were already seen as too expensive. By 1989, a Merkur Scorpio cost nearly as much as a Lincoln Town car, a vehicle that offered far more of what American luxury buyers were looking for. Ford tried to stop the bleeding. They ran an ambitious ad campaign that guaranteed the Scorpio's resale value would match that of a Mercedes-Benz 190E. In 1988, they even removed the XR4Ti's most distinctive feature, the biplane spoiler, and replaced it with a more conventional single wing. But it was no use. The marketing was a disaster, and most people either had no idea what a Merkur was or simply didn't care. It was a classic case of a good product being defeated by a bad business plan. Before we get to the final nail in Merkur's coffin, let me know in the comments, have you ever seen an XR4Ti or a Scorpio in person? It's like spotting a unicorn these days. And if you're enjoying this story about one of Ford's biggest blunders, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next video. The end came swiftly. The final knockout blow was a change in US safety regulations. Starting in 1990, all new cars sold in the country were required to have either driver's side airbags or automatic seatbelts. For Ford, this was the moment of truth. Redesigning the Merkur models to comply with the new laws would have been incredibly expensive. With sales already in the gutter, the company couldn't justify spending millions more on a brand that was a financial disaster. The accountants took one look at the numbers and gave a definitive no. The dream was officially over. In late 1989, Ford announced it was pulling the plug on the Merkur brand. After just 5 model years, with about 42,400 XR4Ti's and just over 22,000 Scorpios sold, the experiment was finished. It became one of the shortest-lived car brands in modern history, a cautionary tale for business schools, and a ghost remembered only by dedicated car enthusiasts. So, why did Ford's grand European dream crash and burn so spectacularly? It wasn't the cars themselves. The XR4Ti and Scorpio were good vehicles that were popular and successful in Europe. The failure came down to strategy, marketing, and a touch of corporate arrogance. Ford failed to understand that in the luxury market, brand identity is everything. You can't just show up with a good car and a strange name and expect to win. They failed on pricing, placing their cars in a category where they couldn't compete, a problem that was only made worse by the exchange rate. And ultimately, it was a failure of commitment. Ford wasn't willing to invest the time and money required to build a new luxury brand from the ground up. The ironic part is that the basic idea was sound. Just a few years later, Acura, Lexus, and Infiniti did the exact same thing, creating new brands to sell premium imported cars, and all became massive successes. Merkur had the right idea, but completely fumbled the execution. Today, the Merkur brand is a ghost, but the cars have found a second life with a small, devoted group of fans who appreciate them for what they are: quirky, capable, and thoroughly misunderstood. They are a rare reminder of a big dream, and of what happens when you take a swing at the king and miss. What do you think? Was Merkur doomed from the start? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thanks for watching.